Hi. All right. So we've all heard of trust exercises, and we may have tried it with a friend at one point, or even after a long, exhausting, and tiring day, we may have collapsed onto our couch or bed. Either way, we trust that something or somebody is going to be there to catch us. So this article discusses trust, specifically institutional trust, and how it pertains to white students versus minority students. Teachers tend to set expectations lower for minority students, which does a disservice to them by not providing support needed for success. So these low expectations happen to lead minority students to not being afforded the same opportunities. So I have with me some pillows here. And let's say, for instance, I was going to fall back onto the floor. White students have more pillows or trust and support in cases such as law enforcement, government, healthcare, school, businesses, banks, financial institutions. And we also tend to treat white students with higher expectations, more fairness, and necessary feedback. As you can see, white students have much more of a trust system to fall upon than minority students.
All right, today I am going to go over the empirical article for the relationship building module, specifically the methods of the empirical article that addresses the relationship between the loss of institutional trust in relation to different racial and ethnic minority groups, specifically middle schoolers. So the total sample size was 227 participants, and those were all middle school students. And this study, like I said, was middle school students, and they were all in grades 6th, 7th, or 8th. Specifically, they were surveyed twice a year in the fall and the spring to determine their assessment of the institutional trust that they have with their school in relation to both teachers and other administrators. So this was a point survey on a scale of 1 to 5, where the students had to assess what their level of trust was in response to certain questions. So they were asked questions like, am I treated fairly? Or do you feel that you're treated fairly? Do you feel that your racial group is treated fairly? And maybe one that's more interesting is, who do you feel is more likely to get stopped in the hallway and ask for a hall pass, a white student or an African American student? And these questions were tracked over a 3-year period. So back to our general population up here. More things we need to know is that this happened in the northeastern United States. All of these students, or at least these schools, were low to low middle class schools, so they had similar economic statuses. And a unique thing about this population is that they were 50-50 African American and white. So the population was then split into 2 separate cohorts. Cohorts split up by school, so this happened across 2 different schools. And each group had a general population with which to take this survey. But in each group, there was a sub-experimental group of 44 participants each that received this thing called a wise intervention. In other words, they received constructive criticism from their teacher that encouraged them to achieve higher potential. In other words, it was positive constructive criticism versus negative constructive criticism, which connotates that the teacher doesn't believe in the student. That happened in their history classes. And then in addition to each of these groups, each group had a placebo group as well, to compare the specific results in the classes of these students that received this wide feedback. One thing that's interesting to note is that this happened in the fall. Can't write. Fall and spring. So it assessed the students' trust over the course of the school year as well, which is interesting because it creates more data based generally versus on a specific teacher. And that is the general overview of this paper.
Okay, so for the results, we're going to use this staircase to show percentages. As you can see, there are 10 stairs, so each stair step is going to represent 10%. Okay, we're looking at the number of, or the percentage of white students and black students who went to college with the placebo effect of, hey, this is feedback for no reason, or with the wise feedback saying, hey, this is feedback saying, I believe in you, and we have that trusted connection. So if we're looking at white students who got the placebo effect, they went up 10, 20, 30, 40, 5%. About 50%, but not quite. Okay, 45% with the placebo effect. The number of white students who went to college, or the percentage of white students who went to college without the placebo effect with the wise feedback, that trusted connection, went up to 50%. So it did go up, just not much. When you look at the covariates involved, it goes from 47%, kind of like on my toe, to 49, almost there. Really not a big difference. Around 50% for white students with the placebo effect and without the placebo effect. Okay? Now, for black students though, it's a little bit different. It starts at 45%, just like with white students for the placebo effect. The placebo effect really did not change anything for them. It was about the same as white students. Here's where things get interesting though. The black students, the percentage of black students who got that wise feedback, who had that trusted connection that then went on to a four-year college, went all the way up to 50, 64%. And with the covariates involved, it went all the way up to 70%. A big difference from down there. Now, if we go back down, we're going to use, for the next part of our study, the results, we're just going to use the first 5 steps. Again, we're looking at white students and black students with the placebo feedback and with that wise feedback. But this time we're looking at the number of discipline referrals they had to the office. Okay? So on a scale of 1 to 5, white students had less than 1 referral to the office. It was actually 0.79 and 0.74. Okay, so it did go down with the wise feedback, but not really enough to make a difference. Literally 0.05 of a point. With the covariates, it was 0.84 and 0.74. Less than 1. Okay, black students were a little bit different though. Black students who had the placebo effect, where there was not that wise connection, had 1, 2, 3, and a 4th office referrals. Okay, a huge difference from where the white population was. Okay, now this is again where it gets interesting. The black students, the number of office referrals that black students had with the wise feedback connection went all the way back down to 1.5. Okay, so the results show us that, yeah, it does have an effect between white and black students, and it does have an effect between the placebo and the wise feedback. That difference is very obvious when you look at it on a staircase or on a graph.